Yo, what's up everyone? Today we're going to talk about the HIMARS that have been taken out in Ukraine since the whole Russia-Ukraine thing started. For a while, the media was all hyped about these being some kind of wonder weapon, but like always, reality is a real downer. Figuring out how many of those American-made HIMARS have been taken out is like trying to solve a puzzle. There are a bunch of reasons why it's so tough. First off, the Ukrainians are really good at keeping it hush-hush when they lose one of these weapons. Second, everyone's always arguing about how many the Russians actually destroyed and when it happened. How many HIMARS did they give Ukraine, and when did they start giving them out? The US first announced they were sending these systems over on June 1st, 2022. Then, Ukraine's defense minister, he's out of the job now, Oleksiy Reznikov, posted about them arriving on June 23rd, 2022. At first, the US gave the Ukrainians 8 of these things and said they'd send 4 more. The US and NATO countries sent different types of these rocket systems, the M142 HIMARS on wheels and the M270 ones that run on tracks. Germany gave them the Mars 2, France gave them the M270 LRU, the UK gave them the M270B1, and Italy gave them the M270A1I. Officially, the US sent Ukraine 40 M142 HIMARS, Germany sent 3, and France, the UK, and Italy sent at least 15 to 17 M270s. So altogether, they gave Ukraine at least 55 to 57 of these systems. Up until January 2024, the media was saying the Russians hadn't knocked out a single one of these launch systems. But in reality, it was a totally different story. When and where did they take out the first HIMARS launch system? The first time we heard about them taking out 2 M142 HIMARS was on July 6, 2022. The Russian Ministry of Defense said they blew up the launch systems along with a bunch of ammo in between Kramatorsk and Drushkivka in the Donetsk People's Republic. By the end of the summer of 2022, the Russian military had knocked out 8 to 10 of these systems. Most of the time, they were taking them out in areas controlled by Ukraine in the Donetsk People's Republic. From September to December, the Ukrainians lost at least 11 of these M142 HIMARS systems. Then they got more systems sent over, probably to replace the ones they lost. What's weird is that a lot of the time they got taken out in pairs. They'd hit a spot where they were parked or a hangar and blow up 2 HIMARS at once. The biggest hit was in early December of 2022. They hit a Ukrainian military base near Grigorovskoye and Shevchenkovo in the Zaporizhzhia region and wiped out 5 HIMARS in one shot. They didn't take out that many HIMARS in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. It sounds more like they just happened to hit a hangar where they were stored instead of a planned attack or ambush. They took out another 4 in Kherson Oblast. They hit the most systems in the part of Donetsk People's Republic controlled by Ukraine. They took out or damaged about 25 of them there. The second highest number was in Kharkiv Oblast, where they took out 10. It's interesting that at the start of the Ukrainian operation in Krinky, they had about 55 GMLRS rockets stored there, but some bloggers were saying they'd fired hundreds of them. How often were the Ukrainians losing those HIMARS? 2022 was the worst year for those HIMARS systems getting knocked out. They lost 31 of them that year, but things changed a little in 2023. The Ukrainians switched up how they used the HIMARS and M270s and changed their supply lines. So in 2023, they only lost 13 of them. But the Russians learned their lesson too. They got better at finding and hitting those systems using radar and electronic warfare. In the first half of 2024, they managed to take out or damage 21 M142 and M270 systems. Since the Ukrainians are having to hit Russian supply lines and support units more and more, it looks like those American rocket systems are going to be closer to the front lines. That means they're going to be easier targets. Why did the Ukrainians lose so many HIMARS? Throughout the whole conflict, the Ukrainians have been using their rocket systems the same way. They park them near a big city, hiding them in industrial zones with their ammo, spare parts, repair crews, the whole shebang. Then they set up a bunch of forward bases and firing positions around the city. They usually drive the rocket systems out to these spots on paved roads. After they fire their rockets, they use the same roads to get back to their bases. They usually hide the systems in garages, industrial areas, sheds, or big farm buildings. From January 1st to June 30th, they reported losing 15 M142 systems and 3 M270 systems. We were able to find the location of some of these systems. 6 times, the rockets were hit in Zaporizhzhia and Mykolaiv oblasts. Even though things are rough on other parts of the front lines, they keep getting hit in these areas. It's weird, but they got hit near Kotlyarevo in March of 2024, and then another one got hit in Shevchenkovo, about 4.5 miles away on June 28th. Even though they lost some systems in that area, the Ukrainian command didn't bother moving their positions or changing the routes they were using. What's interesting is that they were using these rocket systems for very specific missions. That limited where they could use them, and that made it easier for the Russians to find them and take them out. For example, you can look at Kramatorsk and the surrounding areas. From August 13, 2022 to February 21, 2023, the Russians reported taking out 11 M142 and M270 systems. Earlier, on July 6, 2022, they said they took out 2 M142 systems in Malotaranovka, about 4.5 miles from Kramatorsk. They were using those systems in that area because of the battles for Soledar and Artemovsk. The Ukrainians lost Artemovsk in February and March of 2023. They used the systems from one base in Kramatorsk and only used them in a pretty small area for 7 months. What's going down in 2024? After a long break, mostly because they ran out of ammo, those M142 and M270 systems are back in the game. But now the Ukrainians have to react to the Russians pushing forward, and they're having to bring those rocket systems closer to the front lines. That way, their rockets can reach targets in the Russian defenses faster. As a result, since the end of December 2023, they've been losing those systems like crazy. The Russians said they knocked out 6 HIMARS and Mars 2 systems in a week back in June 2024. What's the reason for the big jump in losses? First off, the Ukrainians got a bunch of ammo and spare parts for their M142 and M270 systems. From January to the end of April 2024, they only lost 7 of those systems. But in May and June, they lost 11. Those rockets were out and about more, so they got spotted more often. Second, the fighting really ramped up and new hotspots popped up on the front lines. The Ukrainians had to use their most important weapons closer to the action. What's interesting is that they lost some systems in January and March 2024 near Konstantinovka and Pokrovsk-Mirnograd. That might be because the Russians were pushing hard in those areas, especially around Ocheretine. Third, the Russians really beefed up their reconnaissance and strike capabilities during that time. Finally, the Ukrainians, even though they've been fighting for a long time, keep doing things the same old way. They're using those rockets on secondary parts of the front line, probably for political reasons instead of military ones. What's the total count of HIMARS that got wrecked? According to the Russians and verified sources with location data, they've taken out around 56 M142, M270 systems. That's about 55 to 65 launchers either destroyed or seriously damaged. That's more than the number the Ukrainians officially say they got. Part of the reason they've been so successful is that their reconnaissance and strike capabilities have gotten a lot better. And on July 21, 2024, the Russians said they took out another HIMARS launcher and a Ukrainian ammo depot with 400 tons of rockets and shells. So what's the bottom line? The geography and timing of the M142 and M270 takedowns allow us to make some deductions. It's likely that most of these systems are still tucked away in industrial zones in Zaporizhzhia and Mykolaiv and on forward bases in those regions. But while that made sense in 2023 to back up the Ukrainian offensives in Zaporizhzhia, concentrating such limited firepower in those areas and still trying to hit Crimea is starting to look kind of dumb, especially as things are getting crazier on other parts of the front. Keep in mind that the use of M142 and M270 in Kharkiv, Donetsk, and other regions is pretty sporadic and not really changing the game. At the same time, the risks for the Ukrainians are getting higher with these weapons, and their effectiveness is going down. What's the bottom line? Even though the M142 and M270 are valuable tools for the Ukrainians on the tactical and operational level, they're not being used smart. Looking at the data for 2024, it's clear these systems are stuck on a secondary part of the front, while the Ukrainians are dealing with some serious blow-ups on the other side of the map. Throughout this whole conflict, we've seen the M142 and M270 used against what they call opportunity targets. They're firing at whatever's in range, not necessarily what's important. Sure, it makes for some cool media, but it's not really moving the needle on the battlefield. Thanks for watching, guys. Your support means the world to me. It keeps me going. Hit that like button, drop a comment, and if you found this video helpful, subscribe so you don't miss out on new stuff. See you in the next one.